Good morning to the Caron YouTube audience on the 8th of May, 2022, occasion of Mother's Day, and also another Sunday here on Magic Mountain. And I have an in-person assembly of people that is more full than it has been in a very, very long time. So it's a delight for me to have so many of you able to be here present in the room, and I know our older adult community is also watching on the screen, so good morning to you. And happy to have you here with us as well. The theme for today's service is one that comes up in a rotation of topics, and it's titled New Birth. It entered my rotation of topics one year, I think, at Easter, and or maybe at Christmas. So it probably would make more sense theologically at Christmas. Anyway, that's the theme, and I wanted to somehow connect new birth and Mother's Day, and I have an easy way to do that. So just this past weekend, my stepson's cousin, Katie, announced on Facebook her pregnancy, and Katie knows that they have a boy on the way. So it was a cute birth announcement, and I think many of us are accustomed to how birth announcements and almost everything, gender reveals and all kinds of things, engagement party. It's astonishing to me how social media has influenced the way we observe occasions. But anyway, Katie's announcement of this pregnancy on the day before Mother's Day is illuminating, because I've known about the pregnancy for a little while, but this is the first time that the pregnancy gets out into her social media network, right? So it's a splash, but already was something that we had a private family celebration of. And there are details behind it, like it was a pregnancy that was long sought and prayed for and hoped for, and it really is an extraordinary piece of news. If you know Katie and you know Ryan, it's an amazing piece of information. And we just had a new birth in this extended family. In fact, Katie's brother, Sammy, just had a little girl, Scarlett, so there was a little child born in the extended family. And yesterday, I really enjoyed Katie and Sammy's cousin, my stepson, Jason, was over with us, and we had the grandchildren, Charlotte and Lila. So I don't have my own biological children, but these little monsters have taught me so much. And being married to a woman who is inherently, in her very soul, first a mother, has also taught me a great deal. And being a person in long-term recovery has made me look at the occasion of Mother's Day in a completely different way. Because I will confess, Mother's Day was tricky for me. Not that I ever despised or was completely permanently estranged from my mom until her sad death in 1994. But my relationship with everyone in my family is tainted with alcoholism, and it's affected by it. And it's made the occasion of Mother's Day and Father's Day and all holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all that, it's filled with these childhood recollections of the way alcohol infused itself into our world, and drama and complexity and limited attachment. Like, we were looking good people. We knew how to parade as family, but there was a degree of connectedness that I now realize that some families actually have, that my family struggled to actually sustain. And all of a sudden, here I am, madly in love, not only with my wife, but with the sons that she's brought into my world, and then our daughter-in-law and these granddaughters and the cousins and the kids that are coming. And I've been grafted onto the vine of a much more functional family system. I am able to participate as a constituent in a family that gets together for holidays and really manifests a kind of tribalism that I really didn't experience in my own growing up. And that's not to say, when I first married my wife, my current spouse, I was previously married, but when I first married Judy, the mom of these boys, I saw this as an idealistic thing. I thought they were perfect. I thought they did it all right and all this other stuff. Now I have to tell you, we're so many years in, I can see behind the curtain and I'm like, yeah, they're not perfect either. But they do this family thing better than I had ever seen it or known it. And so maybe there's an obvious correlation to what I'm trying to connect here, but let me come back to my topic, new birth. We have a new baby coming in, and it's a piece of news that affects not only the parents, but this extended family network. And we have clients who come to Magic Mountain, as it's called, and experience this thing called recovery. And it affects not just the individual and their immediate sort of significant other or whoever is immediately proximal, but it affects their whole sort of connected world. And I think it's fair to say that recovery has new birth features. It has a quality of new birth to it that I want to eventually get to. But I also am going to stay a little bit on the sort of theological and spiritual bunny trail that I decided I was called to speak about this morning. So when I was growing up, I was formed in one religious tradition that didn't really talk about new birth and in that explicit way, although it celebrated holidays and it was formerly a religious tradition. I grew up as a Roman Catholic kid. And then I spurned that. I shed it. I threw it off. And I thought I was becoming a sophisticated intellectual brat punk. And I wouldn't have been bothered by that. If you called me, like that when I was 16 and 17, I would have said, yes, I had no patience for what I viewed as the follies of adult reliance on religious systems. And I thought it was the sad crutch of people who couldn't stand up on their own kind of thing. And if you needed a religion, well, excuse the humor of it, but God bless you, And I would have not even said that way, but I would have said it in a snickering, sarcastic, and cynical way. And so as life, I became an avowed atheist and quite anti-religious, really. And as I moved into my young adulthood and went to college, I did dabble in spiritual curiosity, but I also used intellectual pursuits for a kind of spiritual fulfillment that now I realize. So when I was reading certain kinds of poetry or studying music or looking at Einstein or whatever, I think there was a part of me that my spiritual craving was seeking nourishment from all along. I don't think because I avowed myself as an atheist, that meant I became an unspiritual person. And in fact, I think some atheists that I know are among the most spiritual people that you can come across, which is an interesting misconception that I think many in the world suffer. Anyway, let me stay on track a little bit. So, as a young adult going to college, I came, one of the places where my scorn and suspicion about religiosity located itself was in association with a term that probably many of you know, and please, if this is a term that you ascribe to yourself, hang on, because it's the idea of being born again. And I thought that was just the worst thing in the world. I had this whole thing about TV evangelism and late at night, and there were scandals about evangelistic preachers who were revealed to have less than perfect lives, and I was just extremely suspicious about the whole born again thing. And isn't it hilarious that now I'm standing in front of you like this? And one of the reasons why is that such a thing had never really occurred in my life. I had never had a new birth experience until 1989, which is the year I mark the beginnings of my recovery. So if you look at my life pre-1989 and post-1989, it would be pretty hard to say even that everything about the guy is the same. That would be very hard. It would be impossible to say that the Jack pre-'89 and the Jack post-'89 is totally the same dude, just not drinking. Because over a period of time, there's been evolution. And I hope that happens in most people's lives, even if they don't have a pivotal transformation. But not drinking is sort of like the Facebook announcement. It's the day on the calendar that I can pin. But somewhere in there, like was it 2 months after, or was it a week before, or whatever, somewhere in there, I can tell you a fundamental change happened in me in the course of my life. And this is part of the mystery of new birth, is that you can celebrate it and have it not happen, and you can have it happen and not celebrate it. But when it is celebrated, like in that tradition that talks about born again, I was watching the latest 7 episodes of Ozark. Yes, I was watching Ozark. And there's a character in there, not to spoil it for those of you but there's a character in there who is baptized. It made me think of, oh brother, where art thou, or whatever. And if any of you have ever seen the depictions of typical evangelical baptism as this sort of dunking in the water, when new birth is celebrated in Hinduism, in Buddhism, in Christianity, and various of its expressions, and I think in a variety of other settings. So there are all kinds of, these are, when there are rituals of initiation, inauguration, and induction. Those are when as I was prepping this week, those are the 3 words. You look for rituals of initiation, inauguration, or induction. And those are the rituals of new birth in various contexts. They're the rituals of new beginnings. And baptism is an initiatory ritual. It initiates the Christian life in that form. And the induction, I think about that because one of the boys that is another stepson of mine, not the one with the granddaughters, but another one, Jared, who I just am so crazy about. Jared I saw him be inducted into the U.S. Coast Guard. And he's in active service in the Coast Guard, and I'm so proud of him. He's headed to Yorktown this week for a couple more weeks of specialized training. And that induction was an initiatory ritual. And he said to me, coming out of it, I'm now property of the U.S. government. And it was like a little wink. But and later I'd be like, Jared, how's it going? He goes, I'm a trained killer. And he knows he's pushing my buttons because I'm like this ardent pacifist. But I can be both. I can be an ardent pacifist, and I can be insanely proud of him in his Kevlar, and because what he does within the Coast Guard is that kind of, it's a high security thing. Anyway, let me stop bragging about my family. So, what are the hallmarks of the new birth rituals is one of the things I wanted to talk about. New birth rituals look like dunking, donning new clothes. I remember the saffron robes of the Hare Krishnas I used to see when I was a kid in the Port Authority in New York City. Being marked, like branding in Yellowstone. You know, that's an initiatory ritual for those of you who watched that bizarre series. And there's marking, there's revesting, and there's bathing rituals that are typical of this kind of marking the celebration, and there's Facebook posting, right? That's an inaugural ritual that Katie used to go to the world. I am having a baby, right? That's the moment, and it created this festival on the Facebook platform of all kinds of people, some of whom knew how long the struggle had been, and some of them very close in the circle, and some of them not. You can sort of tell by the comments, but not really. Anyway, where I want to land is by asking you, to think about recovery and today, and the reason that you intersect with this message and this moment and this mountain on this day, and whether you have conceived of it as a day you will later look back and go, this was a day in which everything went back and marked that a tide changed in the life of an individual. And I really want you to believe in that and shoot for it. It doesn't mean I can guarantee it. But if you don't shoot for it, and if you don't believe it, you will sort of shoot it out of the sky. If you don't let it happen, I pretty much can guarantee you it won't. But if you allow the possibility of coming to Caron and being in the chair and being in the audience of this message as the potential of the breath of a spirit that could inhabit who you are and carry you into a kind of new existence, and where all kinds of things could begin to unfold. That's another thing to say about new birth, and I'm watching my time because I really want to keep these messages short, especially as we have a big community. I'd like to save as much time for sharing. But one of the mistakes that people also make is confusing inauguration and initiation with the completion of new existence. Right? A new baby is not I often say it's like an undercooked meatloaf, right? And it comes out of the mom when the brain is as big as the vaginal tract can dilate. That's what the biology tells us, is that what times 9 months is that the brain gets so big that the mother's vaginal tract can only dilate that far. That's the mechanism that creates the timing. Otherwise, and what is the true gestation period of a human being? They're like reckoning it about 22 to 25 years. It takes that long before you are really viewed in terms of brain development and all that sort of stuff as truly having kind of finished, which is one of the longest times in which you need this sort of nurturing and close care and I remember walking down the driveway at 13, telling my mother I was done with our family and I was going out on my own, and her watching me from the kitchen window. And she knew I didn't have a credit card, I didn't have a job. There was nothing that was going to happen with this kid except he was going to end up at the end of the driveway and wait for somebody to come get him or come back, right? I could not function on my own. And so new birth is worthy of celebration. And it has pre and post if it will manifest in new existence. Something got you here, and there's way more to do afterwards. And to pick on the religious traditions of my formation, I used to describe myself as very much born again. I didn't have trouble with that. All of a sudden, the guy who was so cynical about it was like, no, I was blind and now I see. I was lame and now I walk. I was a prisoner and now I'm set free. Those are the criteria. It's like, so something like that happened to me, except I meant it about my sobriety. My sobriety has become my spiritual new birth experience. And I locate it also within the languages of different wisdom traditions quite easily. And I think it's neat that it can superimpose itself on different traditions in different ways. But one of my laments is that there are gurus who are out there who market spiritual transformation by having people like bend at the knee and say the magic prayer and then pronounce it accomplished. When that's only the beginning. You would never tell a parent leaving the hospital with the infant, your work is done, right? But maybe that's a thing that often I think as the person leaving treatment, you may think a lot of the work is done. I have to tell you, the work is only beginning. You're going to see someone celebrate a milestone today, and I know she could testify to it not having been easy. I can tell you 33 years in, I am so grateful I'm still sober, but it has not been a piece of cake. And that's one of the things that has to be lived to be known. And no one can forecast what your sufferings ahead will be. But let me get back to the title and finish up. I don't know when you would make a Facebook announcement of your recovery or your family member's recovery. I don't know. But we have patients a lot of the times who are like, I'm not going to tell anyone. And I wonder about that. I think it's interesting because that suggests a shame and fear that's very real and stigma that attaches itself to this illness. We had an amazing banquet for Berks County on Wednesday night, and one of the speakers was a guy who was an alumnus from the 1990s here. And one of the things he said was, I tell people as often as I can that I'm a person in long-term recovery. So there's a place and time when you can and should announce your new birth, I think. Do you want to do it in the first 28 days? Probably not. That's probably pushing your luck. And I've watched people go for the glitz and the attention instead of doing the substance. Remember that there's still an infancy part of this. But I also would say it is something to look forward to. And one of the things that just coming in the auditorium this morning, and I learned that we have somebody who was just here last night who coined out, and they have an inauguration ritual here. It comes near the end of the treatment, which is the ringing of a bell. And what they do is they count the number of times the bell rings, and you're supposed to guess. And who was it who guessed the right number? Is it that person in the room? Derek. So Derek guessed 53, and the bell rang 53 times, which is apparently an omen of great fulfillment, right? And apparently he has a good yank, right? So, because I'm impressed with 53. So, let's ring the bell for one another. Let's believe in this as an occasion of new birth and new beginnings. And let's think about the chapel service today as exciting as Katie's announcement. Let's take a moment to think there is magic happening in this place. And there is magic happening in you, and there's magic happening in you, and there's magic happening in you, in the family as well as in the individual. This is a moment of new beginnings. And I pray it may be so. Thank you very much.